فاصبر صبرا جميلا.
Now a person might ask about memorization, and it's worth us taking a few minutes of our time to share some tips for the students about memorizing and what is needed. So the first thing is, if you want your heart to be something that carries knowledge, you have to clean it out. What did الشافعي say? شكوت إلى وقيع سوء حفظي فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي وقال اعلم بأن العلم نور ونور الله لا يؤتاه ولا يؤتاه عاصٍ. He said, I complained to Waqi' about my bad memory. Waqi', his teacher, Waqi' ibn al-Jarrah, al-Kufi, al-Ru'asi, about my bad memory. So he told me to leave sinning. And he said, you should know that knowledge is light, and Allah doesn't give His light to a sinner. Does that mean that people who have sins will not be able to make hifz? No, no doubt. Like in leaving sins is a way of strengthening your hifz. If you want to strengthen your hifz, you have to if you want to put pure water in a vessel, the vessel has to be clean. If the vessel is dirty, the water will become dirty. So you have to clean, you have to make sure that you are clean, you have a clean heart, ready to accept that knowledge for the light of Allah to go into it. So definitely leaving sin is a cause of strengthening your memory. The two factors that are really important in memorization, there are many factors, but two kind of core things is the amount that you repeat and the size that you memorize in each sitting. So for example, if a person memorizes, let's say, one line of the Mus'haf, and they repeat it 50 times. Later somebody else memorizes 2 lines, and they repeat it, let's say, 30 times. So the basic values that you're changing here, or the basic variables, are the amount you memorize in one time and how many times you repeat it. Now in this you need to realize that there are 2 types of hifz. There is true hifz and false hifz. True hifz is the memory that actually stays with you as long as you go back to it from time to time. I'm not saying you never go back to it, but you go back to it from time to time, it stays with you. False hifz is like, for example, if I read you out a number right now, like a long number, 10 digits or whatever, maybe half the people in the room can remember it for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. If I come after Isha and say, what was that number? Maybe nobody will remember it. It's in your head for a short amount of time, but it's gone. It's gone. What some people don't realize is that you need to do 2 things to move from short-term memory to long-term memory. One is you need to repeat a lot. That's one thing. You need to repeat a lot. A lot more than you think. Short-term memory, some people, they're like, my memory is like a sha'bi, and very good, and just tell me one time. Short-term memory, yes, I can believe that I could tell you a number, I could read 20 digits, and you could remember them. But will you remember them in 3 weeks' time? That requires tikrar, repetition, again and again and again. And it requires repetition in separate sittings. That means that you can't repeat it just in one sitting. You have to have a sitting and then another one with gaps in between, so it kind of fades and it comes back. It fades and it comes back. It fades and until it's solid. This is for most people. Otherwise, if you have the hifz of a sha'bi or a shafi'i, so you don't need to worry about it. That's Allah's gift to you. You don't need to worry about it. Like in most of us, you need to repeat more than you think. So maybe you need to repeat 50 times, 70 times. No, I don't. 10 times is enough for me. I think you need 50, 60, 70 times to repeat to make it really true, not to make it something where you think it's true, but it's gone from you the next day. And you need to keep coming back to it in separate sittings, time and time again. This is repetition. Also, don't try to memorize too much in the beginning. Make it a very small amount to begin with, and increase your memorization slowly over time. Because memorization is a bit like a muscle. When you start off, it's very weak and you can't do very much, so you just lift a very light weight. And as you develop yourself and it gets stronger, you can lift a very heavy weight. Would it make sense the first day the brother goes into the gym and he gets the bar and he fills it with all the weights in the gym all the way to the other side? And then he sits there and he drops it on his chest. Doesn't make sense, right? Hifd is like that. The first day you're going to come, you're going to say, right, today I'm going to memorize. Sometimes the brother said this to me. They're like, yeah, I've made a program for my hifd. I'm going to do 10 pages every day until I finish the Quran. Say, how much did you used to memorize before? 2 lines, a quarter of a page. So you're not going to go from quarter of a page to 10 pages, are you? Maybe go from quarter of a page to half a page, and from half a page go to 3/4 of a page, and from 3/4 of a page to a page to a page and a half, and 2 pages, and eventually you'll get to 10 pages. No problem. But you can't go from 0 to 10 pages in one day. So take it slowly. Okay, so we've understood the 2 main factors, which is how much you memorize in one sitting, make it as small as possible, and how much you repeat, and repeat more than what you think you need, and make your repetitions in different sittings. You can't just repeat it in one sitting and then think I memorized it. You have to repeat it in more than one sitting. Now we come to the next point in helping the students with hifd. There are 3 categories of what you memorized. 3 types of hifd. Hifdun qadim, wa hifdun qarib, وَحِفْظٌ جَدِيد. People use different terminology for them. That's what I like. حِفْظٌ قَدِيم قَرِيب جَدِيد. Qadim, what does it mean? It means the hifd that is old and it's firm with you. You need to revisit it from time to time, but you don't need to revisit it a lot. For example, no doubt Surah Al-Fatiha, that's not really an example. Let me give a different example. Maybe for those of you who have memorized quite a bit of the Quran, if I asked you to recite, let's say, عَمَّا يَتَسَاءَلُونَ, and you've already memorized, let's say now you've memorized 5, 6, 7, 10 ajza of the Quran, probably you can memorize it you can read it back to me without any mistakes. Inshallah ta'ala. And maybe you need to read it from time to time. Maybe you read it once a week. Maybe you read it once every 2 weeks. Maybe you read it once a month. But it's not going anywhere fast. It's in your memory. It's good. This is the old memorization. All you need for the old memorization is you need to just revisit it on a fixed time. What does that mean? Every 7 days, every 10 days, every 2 weeks, every month. I would say, ideally, 7 days would be amazing for the Quran, if you can do it. And I don't say that I can do it, but if you can do it, every 7 days would be very nice. That every 7 days you go back to and you revise the surah it's already there nice and firm in your head. So it's already there, you memorized it, you remember it, you don't make any mistakes, and every 7 days, every 10 days, you go back to it. Maybe for hadith, you can't do it maybe every 7 days. If you memorize a lot of hadith, maybe you have to do it in a month, you can go back to it once. But the point is, it's there, it's nice and solid in your head, it's inscribed, it's written there, and all you need to do is just visit it from time to time. If you see that you made a mistake, now you need to give a little bit of attention. Give it that day, make sure you get rid of that mistake, fix it, fix what you did wrong, and then again, it's just there, just keep revisiting it from time to time. This is the old memorization. Then you have the new memorization. We'll jump to the new one. The new one is something, it's the first time you're memorizing it today. So this one, no doubt you have to spend a lot of time repeating, and you know that tomorrow and the next day and the next day you're going to have to repeat it again. You can't just say after 7 days, I learned the page today and 7 days later I'm going to read it. You're not even going to remember anything on the page after 7 days. You're going to need to be today, morning, evening, tomorrow, morning, evening, the next day, maybe after every prayer. And you need a lot of effort to bring that new one in and bring it into your memorization. But it's not the hardest one. The hardest one is the one in the middle. the one that we might call hifthun qareeb, the one that you recently memorized. Because this one, you've memorized it, but if you don't make some efforts with it in these days, it's going to go. The example the Prophet ﷺ gave of the Quran is like the camel that's tied up. You know, they used to tie the camel up with those things they put on their head now. It's to tie their camel's feet with them. And so basically when they would tie the camel's feet, you're not tying the camel to the wall. There's no wall, you're in the desert, right? You're tying the camel's feet together. What will happen? The camel's gonna move its feet. Eventually the camel's gonna go. So what do you have to do? Every now and again, you have to go back and tie the camel's feet again. The Quran is like that. The first time now you've memorized it, you've revised it today, tomorrow, now you tied the camel the first time. If you don't go back to it in a couple of hours, camel's gone. It pulled its feet apart and it's run off. If you go back to it regularly, just keep tightening it, keep tightening it, keep tightening it like that. I believe the most effort you should make is the middle category. Why? Because this is the one you've already invested time. If you don't memorize anything new today, okay, it's not ideal, but alhamdulillah, at least you've got the old one. But the worst situation is the one who is memorizing and losing, memorizing, losing, memorizing, losing, memorizing, losing. It's like the person who's on a treadmill, he's running really fast, but he's not moving anywhere. What are you on today? Al-Baqarah, tomorrow Ali Imran, the next day An-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah. Go back to Al-Baqarah, nothing. As if it wasn't memorized. We've all done it. I've done it. I can say I've done that. I've done that kind of hifth. I'm like, this is the 5th time I'm memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah. You know, I've been through that same situation of how it was. And it just comes because you're not giving your attention to that newly memorized content. The one you just memorized recently, you've got to keep coming back to it. And you've got to connect it to what came before and what came afterwards. You can't memorize a page and then turn it over and memorize a page. You memorize a page, connect it. What does the end, the beginning, read the previous page, read the next page, the previous page, the next page, the next page, read the previous page. You've got to keep it all connected because it's only very new. And until you've had enough sittings with the Quran and enough times you visited that, it's not going to be something solid in your mind. And so it goes like that. In the beginning, you need to do it a lot, a little bit less, little bit less, little bit less. How do you do it little bit less, little bit less, little bit less? Well, as you add new memorization, the one that you memorized 3 days ago, you're going to read it a little bit less than you did the day before. Does that make sense? Like, for example, if you read, let's say, page 10, the next day you read page 10 and 11. The next day you read page 10, 11, and 12, for example. So page 10 is, over time, it becomes something that is very comfortable and it becomes something you're not making mistakes in. And then you can just revisit it every few days and so on, every couple of days, every 3 days, every 4 days, until it becomes like that. It becomes really solid. It's the same when you're memorizing hadith. Yes, you can memorize hadith independently, like you don't need to connect one to the other necessarily, unless you're memorizing the book like that. But it's very important that, again, you revisit and you revise. And my suggestion would be, if you have a mistake in the hifth that you memorized yesterday, you have a mistake, don't memorize new things today and then have 2 sets of mistakes. Instead, focus on the one that you have mistakes on, correct it, improve it, make it solid, and then when you're ready, move on to the next one. And it goes like that. So a person who does this over time becomes very, very good at memorizing, not just Quran. Quran, hadith, poetry, mutun ilmiya, Islamic texts. Someone might ask, what should we memorize? What is the type of content that we should be memorizing? So my advice is, first of all, to focus on the Quran, no doubt. If you have finished a good amount of the Quran, you can start to memorize the hadith. What do I mean by a good amount of the Quran? I mean enough that you have a solid program and you're not worried about leaving the Quran. Does that make sense? For example, someone says, I memorized 10 ajza of the Quran. a third. Now you've got a program, inshallah, you're memorizing daily and everything like that. So you can start memorizing hadith. It doesn't hurt you, inshallah. If you need it, yani maybe you need it, so you can start slowly memorizing hadith because you've got a good amount of the Quran and it's ongoing. But as for someone who's just started memorizing Quran, maybe he's memorized 1 juz or 2, and maybe he's not sure if he's going to be able to keep going. So it doesn't make sense for that person to add hadith into it and then lose the memorization of the Quran as well. But once you've got a good habit of memorizing the Quran, like half or a third, so you can start adding some hadith in there without making yourself too busy, not to this extent that you stop memorizing the Quran, but just that you are started on the hadith. And then over time, you should also add to memorize texts. That is, for example, something that summarizes, let's say, Aqeedah for you, something that summarizes, let's say, the science of hadith for you, something that summarizes, let's say, for example, usul al-fiqh for you, like a summarized text that you can, from it, you can keep in your mind everything that you learnt from your teacher on that topic, like a small, we call it a primer, just something that, like keys that open the door to the topics your teacher already told you about. And you can memorize some poetry after that for the benefits in the language, for the benefits in the knowledge that is contained within it, and so on. But a person puts their main energy on the Quran, put their main energy and their main focus upon the Quran.